Welcome to the Thought Leadership Podcast, where we share insights on how you can become the go-to thought leader in your niche. I'm your host, Alejandro Sanoja, founder and personal branding consultant at Latin Empresarios. And today our guest is Michelle Raymond. Michelle Raymond is the Chief LinkedIn Strategist at Good Trading Co. and a founding member of the LinkedIn Small Business Advisory Council for LinkedIn pages. Michelle specializes in helping business owners make a real impact. As a leading global authority and best-selling author on LinkedIn pages, her passion is to change the world by doing good business with good people. Well, Michelle, I'm excited for this conversation. I've done a ton of preparation and I am ready to change my mind and to learn a lot, because I thought that personal pages on LinkedIn are what you should focus on. And doing the research, I'm like, Michelle has a point here. So I wanted to start with, at which point do you think that a company should dedicate time and resources to their LinkedIn page? Is it kind of like setting up the dominoes where first the founder, personal page, then the employees, and then the company, or is it differently? You are the expert, so I want to hear your opinion.
I'm really excited to have this conversation, and I really hope by the end of this, I can change your mind and the listener's mind to a place that LinkedIn company pages can actually help amplify personal brands. So I want you to look at it that it's not going to take away, but how do we make it work? It's always the number one question that I get asked, because as founders, particularly of small businesses, if you're listening in, what happens is you've got so many different jobs to do on every day, and you think, how can I keep up with it all? So to answer your question, when do you need one? So if you're new to LinkedIn, first of all, you're going to absolutely focus on your LinkedIn profile, your personal profile for you as the founder or employees, making sure that that's really something that reflects you and your experiences. Now, when you do that process, you're going to realize when you update your work experience that it's going to ask you where you work, and it's going to ask you to type in a company name, and that company name is linked to a company page. Now, if it's your own business, you have to make sure at that point you go and set up the company page. Now, the good part is it's only going to take you around 15 minutes. It's free. It's really easy to get that first initial setup done. And then you'll go back and update your profile. Now, that's great. Takes away those little gray boxes. And now we've got a bit more credibility on your personal profile and for your business. But then comes the next question: how much time do we put into both? Because again, most of us are time poor, resource poor. Two ways we can go around this, depending where you're at in your journey. First one, what you can actually do is you can put limited content over on the company page, or you might even just put one post that says, hey, I don't do a lot of work over on my company page. Come and visit me over on my personal profile. Because you might actually see that people can discover your company in lots of different ways that you will never imagine. So a Google search, your LinkedIn company page will show up. A search on certain topics and content, it may show up. So there's lots of different ways that people can find it. Saying you've got a little bit more time, you could start to use your company page as what I call your greatest hits library. So repurposing your really great personal content that you've put out on your profile. Now, my disclaimer is, don't do it on the same day. Don't do it really close together. Give it a bit of breathing space, and then just put the best of the best. As someone told me, all killer and no filler. And I really love that saying. So if I come to your company page, I just see the best of your content. Then there's the third place that you can do, and it's actually not against the LinkedIn terms and agreements to get a third party to create content for you on your company page. So if budget allows and resources allows, that's another option to be able to keep it going. So, but if you're just starting out, definitely focus on establishing your personal brand. You'll reach more people, and you'll be, more well known by building those relationships.
I love that overview, Michelle, and I want to go deeper into several of those points because I thought that, hey, you have to at least let people know that your company is alive, because I see a lot of people that have company pages. They set up all the different profiles, right? Like they think I have to be everywhere: LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, MySpace, whatever. And then they do it and then those pages are graveyards where basically the last post was 2 years ago. And I think that's a bad image because people, especially people who understand the world of social media a little bit better, might think, hey, is this company still in business? Especially if it's a smaller ish company. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say you lose credibility because that reflects on your brand. So every touch point that someone has with your brand, whether it's the company page or your profile, anywhere in, as you said, TikTok, Instagram, those kind of places, if you aren't creating content, it does leave a lack of trust out in the universe where people go, is it real? Is it legitimate? Is it still going? And that's the last thing that we want when we've got their attention when they land on the page. So if you can't be active on the page, just put something there to keep it ticking over. LinkedIn's given us a great new feature called repost, which you can use that to put content on your company page. Now, is it the best? Are you going to reach the most people possible? Absolutely not. But does it make it look like your page is active? Absolutely. And so that can be an easy way around it.
Correct. And I do, that's what we do, and that's what we recommend. We say, hey, focus on your personal page, but make sure that you follow all the steps as you mentioned, right? You have a logo, description, some call to action, and every once in a while, um, maybe it's when you post a new blog or something, just let people know that you are alive and you're in business. But I've also seen, and I was trying to look for some good examples. I think Gong would be a great example. There's some company pages that are killing it. They have a ton of engagement. It's basically the brand has a personality. So I've never seen the behind the scenes of what it takes to do that. So I wanted to see if you had some insights on at what point does it make sense? Okay, level one is post content once in a while. Level two, hey, the best hits. I love what you mentioned about, hey, the best hits on your personal. Make sure you're putting them after on your company page. What would be kind of like tier three, tier four of in terms of putting some extra effort to get that ROI on the back end? Because I know it's definitely possible. I've seen some companies do it. So what would be your recommendation to reach those higher levels of engagement?
Look, Gong is a great example, and it's often one that comes to mind for most people when they think of a successful company page. Now, the trick is if you actually go back and listen to the story of why it's so successful from the head of marketing and you read the story, you'll actually see that that has taken years for them to build, and it aligns with a company culture and resources that they're putting towards it. So it's not just a one person company, one person business that is trying to, take over LinkedIn. I don't think that that's reasonable to try and compare the two. But what they do really well is they engage with people and they give a ton of value with their content. And that's what people are drawn to. So when a company page adds value, then people are drawn to it because why? It's worth my time to go and see it. Historically, the content on company pages was all about the company, 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 company. And so it was broadcasting figures and, our annual reports, and we did this in a way that realistically, no one else cares. We're on LinkedIn to try and find answers to our own problems. So, how can you do this? Quite often, an easy tip to do is to tag in some individuals into the conversation. So, by actively bringing people into the conversation and creating posts that spark conversations with questions, can often be a good place to start to get that momentum. Now, I've got one of my clients who doesn't have a big page. It's about, 2,500 followers. But we have this fun way that we invented a game that you get the trophy for guessing the right answer for what, the post that we do. Now, the trophy is just an emoji. It is nothing exciting, but we make it fun that somebody's now got it. And then we make a big deal that we've now taken it and given it to the next person. So it's like, who's got the trophy now? And so you can create fun in company pages, bring them to life, give them some personality, and try and do some different stuff. If you try and just be like everybody else, which is completely the opposite of what branding should be, you just fade into the background. And that's the last thing that we want. So try some new things, try some fun things. It's okay to have fun on company pages, but it's that personality and building B2B communities, which is really important.
You bring up a great point with the gamification of the content. And I had it written down here to ask you about that, which is because I know you train people, you train companies, and you train the employees of the companies on how to basically make the most out of their LinkedIn presence. So do you have any insights or not or advice on how companies can internally gamify the content that it's on their company page, as well as how their employees use it? I know there's some software out there like Bamboo from Sprout Social, but I wanted to get your thoughts on some examples or some ways in which companies can, hey, if they have employees that I'm all in, I want to do it, what are some of the ways to keep them engaged and motivated?
Look, the first thing that we've got to start with on any program is to have the CEO involved. So, whoever's at the top of the food chain, they have to be a part of this process. Why? Because the rest of the business looks to them to copy their behavior. So, if the senior leadership team aren't involved in this process, I tell you what happens. The marketing team might set it up. It might be a really great program and they'll put so much effort into it, and then they'll realize that nobody else is doing what they ask. And 3 months later, everybody's deflated. They say LinkedIn doesn't work, and then they give it up. Now, why I say put the senior leadership team to lead from the front. Number one, if they've got buy-in, it means the teams have the right resources and time available to them to support their time on LinkedIn. Now, it's all well and good to say, hey, create your personal brand as an employee and go out and become an employee advocate for the company. Now, that sounds great in theory, and I'm a huge fan of it. But in reality, most people are petrified of getting out and doing that stuff. So if you've got someone in your business that is prepared to go out on LinkedIn and wants to build their brand, support them. Now, that support and gamification of it could be as simple as whoever gets the most impressions that week, maybe gets extra time at lunch or gets an acknowledgement or a gift card or something. But in my experience, a simple acknowledgement and thank you goes way further than anything else, because it's that recognition from people that are important in the business coming back and saying, we notice what you're doing. Now, I've had some fun in the past where you could set up, awards for people who get the post with the most reach. You could get the support, different posts of, you liked the most posts or you commented on the most posts, because I don't want everything on LinkedIn to become around the numbers of particular posts, because it's something that ultimately we don't have a lot of control of, and it takes some time to build up that experience. So reward the good behaviors. There's a piece of software called Octopost. If you've got a lot of money and you can afford, to spend, I think it's about 10,000 US or something a year. So it's not cheap. But if you're at a company that's of a reasonable size, it's brilliant. You can trace and track everything, and that becomes like next level. So if you've got a bigger team and a bigger company, that makes sense. Smaller companies, like I said, it might be an extended lunch break. It might be go home early on a Friday. It doesn't have to cost money. But like I said, make it fun. But the acknowledgement is the key piece on any program that you build.
I want to connect several points that you mentioned now and that we were talking before, which is measurement. Because on LinkedIn, we have mostly what would be called vanity metrics, right? Likes, engagements, and follows. And LinkedIn is a great tool to impact the ROI that matters, which is sales, right? Like social selling. We've had we work with people that do social selling. We've had a ton of them here in the podcast, and we totally get it. That's how we use those approach and to book people for our podcast, right? Like that's kind of like our what we're selling. So how would you advise people to, especially let's say if you're doing a company program and you want to demonstrate the value, because if you get it right, like long-term branding, influence, education, creating demand, if you get it, you're like, yeah, not everything can be measured, there's a dark social, just do it. But you also have to find a balance between, hey, It's not just do it. We need some measures of success to understand that we're getting closer. Um, I know, for example, a software like HubSpot measures everything, what happens on the website, and they can attribute revenue to particular pieces of content. How would you advise a company when they're creating this program to create metrics of success? Are there some short, medium, and long-term ones? Do you recommend having some vanity ones just for growth on the platform and then some other software to track revenue? How would you go about creating those KPIs?
Yeah, look, and it's a tricky one, right? Because on one hand, you might have someone within the business that's responsible for, the growth on LinkedIn, and you need to be able to measure that, almost to probably justify your existence in that role. So if someone doesn't see those numbers going up, so for me, I always start with number of followers. That's the first thing that I look at. Is the page growing the number of followers? Because that's really easy, and that should grow over time as you get better and you invite more people. It's really easy to do that. So, first of all, we've got to build the audience. Now, next, it can be something similar, like simple, like having your employees who engaged with those posts, who created their own posts, who liked, and that can be self-reporting. So we can go to the extreme and have all of this, dream data that we can go and analyze and come back. And for some businesses of a big size, that's going to be really important. But I think for most people, it's just keeping an eye on what actions are people taking and are they meaningful. So I approach LinkedIn probably a little bit different to a lot of other LinkedIn trainers because my background is 20 years of B2B sales. I'm a relationship builder. Every success that I've had in sales has been about building relationships. So for me, there has to be a piece that is about how did you nurture those relationships that you had? So were you engaging in content? Did you send a direct message? Did you have calls off the platform? Because that's ultimately my goal, is to have as many calls with people off the platform. And that's not measured within LinkedIn. That's something that you can do very easily just with a spreadsheet. But I think if we keep it simple, if someone's starting out on a program, have a conversation with the employee, not just what the company wants. Find out what their goal is. Their goal could be, I want to appear on this podcast. Now, if their goal is that, you have to measure what steps they're taking and did they end up on the podcast over a period of time. And that can be from building your personal brand. You will get more employees doing things if you find out what they want and what they want to get out of it and help them achieve that. So this is what I talk about synergy. It's about getting the personal brand to help build the company brand and using the company brand to help build the employee's personal brand. And it's by using the two together that you get better results than just having one of them by their own. So it's the reason why people want to work for, say, Google or Microsoft in that space instead of a small, good tech company that might be in the middle of America somewhere that nobody's ever heard of. It's that brand that draws us to it. So from that perspective, don't underestimate the power of working together, but look for the goals that work most for the business, and it could be lead generation, could be brand awareness, or maybe you want to recruit top talent. So you have to have goals in mind for each of those outcomes.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was not thinking about that, but definitely if the company page is active and has kind of like a personality, it's definitely gonna attract uh some like a certain particular type of people. So you definitely want to align that. Now, Michelle, I want to go deeper into those programs. How would you advise people to get started? You mentioned, hey, not everyone is super comfortable and confident in getting started and engaging on LinkedIn. So for someone who is either leading the program or getting started, what are some of those first steps? Is it just resharing some of the posts that are on the company page? Is it copying and pasting it and posting it as your own? What are some of those initial baby steps that you recommend people to take to get comfortable with, as an employee of a company, engaging on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I love that you've asked this question because there's this general assumption if somebody does training with me that magically they're going to turn into the 1% of people who create content regularly on LinkedIn. It's important to note that roughly, call it 95, 99%, somewhere in between there, depending whose stats you read, that most people will never, ever, ever take an action on LinkedIn except log in, have a look around, see what's going on, and get back out of there. They actively make sure that they don't press any buttons, likes, comments, anything along those lines. And they certainly aren't creating content. So if you have people within the business, you need to realize that you may only have a couple of people that are willing to put themselves out there and create some content. And you're going to have people at every part of that spectrum. Now, for some people, it might be just setting them up on LinkedIn. They may not even have a profile. So for me, it's all about the baby steps of taking them where they're at and taking the next action to move along this step. Now, for some people, like, our common friend, Michelle Griffin, diving in the deep end is what worked for her, from going from nothing to deep end. For me, I think it's probably more manageable to go from someone that does nothing to maybe you're happy to press like. Maybe every now and then you might support somebody that's a new starter at the company and support that post and say, welcome to the team. Start by supporting other people's content, and especially the company page content. The more that you do that, the more it helps the business grow, because your business will stand out. And the more it stands out, the more opportunities come. More opportunities, more conversions equals more sales. And that money comes back around into the business for employees. And so the more that you can help, the more that they can help you. And this is what I, like to talk about. So baby steps, reshare is a great place to start. It doesn't take any time. It's shows something on your profile, shows that you're active and alive on the platform. And it gives people just a note that, hey, you saw this and it's important. And maybe it shows to someone in your network. So again, for those of you who don't want to do anything that's visible, direct messaging could be it. Reach out to someone you used to work with, get comfortable with people that you like, people that you want to know what they're up to. And it doesn't matter. It may not be related to your business right now, but that practice will help make you feel more confident to do it for the business down the track in your own time. So for me, to sum it up, it's all about meet people where they're at, let them progress at their own time, have the company support, have a good social media policy in place that gives them that support. And I've just done some training with a company yesterday, which was about keeping employees safe online. So acknowledging that when you're out there, something might happen, and what are the steps that the company does to protect you. And I think that's a piece of the puzzle that I don't hear people talk about enough. And I'm hoping to change that conversation.
Well, that's such a great point, because here I'm an assumer. I make these mistakes a lot, but you said the first step is just to like a post. And I love that, because it is true that I don't remember what the percentage is, but I know that it's high, that the majority of people are lurkers on LinkedIn. And here I am thinking that the first step would be either reshare or create a post. And you're just saying, hey, I just want you to go from lurker to active with a like, a DM, or something. And I think that's brilliant, because that is the first step. Just like get out from the group of lurkers and do something, even if it's sending a DM to someone who just got a promotion or something like that. Now,
Yeah, for some
go
people, it
ahead.
could be accepting connection requests. There are people out there that will not accept connection requests from anyone that they don't know. So for some people, it could be even just that. But again, just baby steps. Don't try and force someone, because if you try and force someone, you've got zero chance of it happening.
Correct. Correct. Michelle, I want to get your take also on how to use the company page in engagement in general, because I used to do this where, for example, I would either a company page would go out, or one of, let's say I'm promoting a podcast episode, it goes out on my page, and then I get the company page and I make a comment like, hey, the full episode is here. And then I get the podcast page, because we did a podcast page, and then the podcast page says something else, right? So it's either me or someone from our team going to the page and making that comment. So it's kind of like fake engagement, right? And then I think there's a line between fake engagement in helping yourself create momentum for engagement. For example, when I share a podcast episode, usually I get a little bit of engagement again with the guest. And we've already talked about, we have so much to say, and we said it during the conversation, and it could come off as fake with something like, hey, thank you for having me on again on the podcast. And then I just comment, yeah, it was great having you. Thank you for sharing your insights. I know, for example, that the other extreme of that is do the complete fake engagement pods that are out there that you just see the same comment over and over again. And I totally get it. I don't want to say like, oh, that's bad, you're doing it wrong, because I get it that the goal is to spike the algorithm and generate a little bit of momentum, but I think some people take it too far. So what would you tell someone who is managing that company page and they're thinking about using it for engagement or trying to create a little bit of momentum with some people that are going to help them? Hey, would you mind? Maybe they're telling some employees, would you mind commenting on this day that we have a big campaign? What are your thoughts around finding that balance between no engagement and no promotion to engage and fake engagement?
Well, I look at it this way. I have a kind of different take on it. I don't think that it's fake engagement, but picture this. You go to a wedding and you're having a great day, and probably some people are having drinks, and there's a dance floor in the middle of the space. And there's a good DJ or music playing in the background that everybody's really enjoying, having a great time. That dance floor stays empty until that first person gets up. Once that first person gets up, what happens? Oh, they went first. I'm happy, uncomfortable. I'll go too. I don't want to be the first one, but if you go first, I'll join you. And then all of a sudden, you've got everybody's families up, all the friends are up, and everyone's having a great time. But nobody wants to be first. So, what can happen is if you can use your company page or any of your employees to go first, then what that does is creates a space for other people to join in the conversation who may not want to be seen as the first person that engages. And that especially happens on company pages. You will get very little engagement for lots of different reasons. And that can be, especially if your company page is adding a lot of value and solving problems that are happening out in the world. If you're an employee and you've got that problem, do you want all of your colleagues to know? Do you want your bosses to know? Do you want your competitors to know that you found the answers to these issues? Absolutely not. So don't think that people aren't watching what's going on. But I always like to say, get out there first, lead by example, be the first on the dance floor to create that space for other people to join in. Now, every time you comment as your company page, that's like a little signpost that directs people back to your brand and adds more credibility to your personal brand. Now, that's what I've done significantly over the last 2 years, because originally nobody knew my company name, nobody knew what it does. And I've been able to leverage my personal brand to build it and vice versa, because when people look at a company page, here's the cool part. Whether I'm a solopreneur or a multinational company, we've got the same amount of space, same banner size, same number of posts we can do, same number of comments that we can do. There's no limits. So it's not a pay to play with much bigger companies. And so you can actually appear way bigger just by being top of mind and building a good community. People will assume, because you're creating content and being active, they will assume you're probably much bigger than maybe what you are, and that will open up doors for you. So there's other ways right now that LinkedIn's just recently released a feature where company pages can follow other company pages. And we can do that really easy away from the home feed. Now, why would we want to do this? Well, easy. Maybe you've got some customers that you want to support their content. Maybe it's a potential customer that you want to see, have they shown any signs that they're going to be buying anytime soon? Could be competitors. You might want to keep an eye on that from a market intelligence point of view. But ultimately, it could be other businesses that you want to support because they're referral partners. So we're going to start seeing company pages, specifically, these brands get involved in more and more conversations, more and more thought leadership pieces. And that's what we've got to start seeing brands as, and company pages by association as a place to lead B2B thought leadership. Because theoretically, a big business should have more access to more information and resources than any individual employee or person out on the platform. So we're at the beginning of this. We're not anywhere near where we'll get to. I've spoken to the B2B Institute, which is run by LinkedIn. I spoke to someone there just last week, and they're saying, Michelle, do you understand the opportunity that they see it, B2B on LinkedIn, is they estimate it's like something like $9 trillion worth of business out there that nobody knows about because B2B traditionally hasn't used marketing. We only know it for B2C. That number is mind blowing, and that's the opportunity that is just starting out. It's not there already. We're at the beginning, but think $9 trillion worth of business they estimate is out there that nobody knows about.
Yeah, and it's so true. I want to get your thoughts on this because now that you mentioned that opportunity, I think in big part is that people develop an affinity with B2C brands, right? Like direct to consumer brands. People assume they have a personality and they connect with those brands and they become fans of those brands through their consumption. And then, of course, I do think that there's an affinity with B2B brands, but it comes more from the employees, right? Like people that identify as ex-Googlers or ex-this or Deloitte alumni, right? Like within the people that connect with the company as an employee, especially in B2B, they develop an affinity. But I think that the opportunity that you mentioned aligns with the brands, the B2B brands that are able to walk the line between B2B and B2C and develop a personality for the brand through their page are going to be able to capture so much demand because of what you're mentioning. So if you're working with a company to develop that brand voice on how to interact, because I love it when I see a company commenting on other company pages and kind of like it, making jokes or just you totally see that it's on brand and it's when it's well done, it's worth more than however amount of campaigns and ads. So how would you go about advising a company to create that brand voice and to start shaping that brand voice so that you can go in the direction of building a B2C personality so that you create fans not only internally as employees, but also externally as consumers and clients?
Yeah, and this is the exciting part. This is where we're just starting out, and we've done a lot of it in the personal brand space for individuals, but now to do it for brands on LinkedIn is just going to be amazing. So, if you want a good example of how this works, on LinkedIn, you have product pages which now have groups attached. Now, groups are the space where LinkedIn allows you to start to build your own community. A really excellent example of how this works, exactly like you just described, is the Canva page. So everybody has probably used Canva to create their own graphics, and I'm no different. And what you see is they've got access to their community, and their community starts to become advocates. So having brands now build communities is going to be the next step in B2B space. Now, how can you do that? It can be as simple as there's lots of research to say if a company or a brand has a mascot or a logo or some kind of cartoon character that we can immediately identify. So Salesforce is typically an example that they use. They've got the little camper or something, I think it is, that goes along. But having that instantly recognizable, oh, I'm on that team, that draws my eye, that stands out. And it's all going to be about not just copying what your competitors do. So it could be that you're being fun. It could be that you're engaging. I love those Twitter fights that you see between, I don't know, Wendy's and McDonald's or places like that, Aldi and other shopping, networks. But when you see that done well, it's really powerful, like you said, and reaches people in a way that it's not boring, which is the key part. The other part that we want to make sure is your brand memorable, so it's in there. But the third step is can I recall it when I have the need to buy? And that's the important part, because we have information coming to us as, B2B buyers, have information coming from everywhere all day, every day. So when it comes to time that they want to buy, can they recall your business and your content? And that's the importance of company pages. That's the importance of building thought leadership for your brand. And that's the importance of having that as well as your employees' personal brands. So, again, everything in combination, everything in synergy, but it's about being creative. And I think the brands that take a few risks, which is not traditionally what's happened in B2B space, but they'll get rewarded with new business.
I totally agree with all of that, and I wanted to go deeper into what you mentioned about the engagement on social media, because I feel like there's a line there where there are some companies that are so big and have so much liability that they have to be so careful with what they say and how they say it, that it's that almost the risk is too big for the reward, right? It's like, hey, don't, all the lawyers have to approve everything and you have to be super careful. So at some point, it's almost not worth it. Let's just go develop a personal brand. That's what I'm thinking. I might be wrong, but it's kind of like what come to mind. So do you think there's a threshold, or what would you advise to a company that has some liability risk because of their size and how known they are? Of course, public companies come to mind, but there might be private companies that are so big that there might be some risk of being sued. Do you have any thoughts on how to navigate those waters?
Yeah, and you're right. We need to be mindful. And this is why, having a game plan up front and having goals and clear guidelines through a social media policy can help. There are some industries which are highly regulated, like the financial planning industry. You can't just go and post whatever you want on LinkedIn. So they have to navigate those kind of things. For me, there's also that, are we just doing it because we've always done it that way? Now, those businesses that go, I've had clients like that where it has to be approved by about 10 different people for a simple post. Those companies, they're going to get left behind and they are going to become the dinosaurs of the online world. Not having a presence and not being active and just being blah, blah in the background is how competitors that are willing to find a way to make it work within the boundaries of whatever, legal things or branding guidelines. Those companies that make it work are the ones that they'll be top of mind. They'll have the lion's share of opportunities come to them, and therefore they will probably close more sales. So it will become that vicious cycle that I spoke about just before, where you get more sales. That means your revenue goes up. You've got more that you can spend on things, be it better talent, be it advertising, whatever it happens to be, more technology. It can come around. And then all of a sudden you've got better technology. That means you win more opportunities. You've got better people working for you. You win more opportunities. So the vicious cycle that's going to happen if you sit back and just let somebody else own your industry and own your space, you'll become the dinosaur online. And we know how that turned out. And so there's a really big opportunity for brands that start, even if you're listening into this podcast today, those brands that get started and own their industry, own their niche. It's really hard, even as an expert like myself who loves company pages, to catch up to other brands that have got a head start. So do not sit back. I've had people that have been following my content for 2 years now, that back at the beginning, I've been going, guys, you need to have a company brand just as much. And I'll tell you why I've been so hard on it. I built an amazing niche community in the beauty industry. That's the industry that I came from originally. So I had about 5,000 followers specifically built around ingredients that go into skincare and hair care and products like that. Here's what happened. I had an amazing niche, 5,000 followers. As I said, everybody pretty much globally knew me for that. What happened? I changed jobs. What happened? I took all of those with me. What was left at the company? Zero. They had nothing because they didn't build the company brand. So building your company brand is your insurance policy for when people change jobs, which we hope that they won't, but inevitably they will, and especially in these financial times that we're in. So imagine you've got your best employee, put all your eggs in that one basket, and out they go. what are you going to do?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I do believe that same with podcasts, we're still, I know a lot of people have been sharing stats on it, but it's something like, because even with blogs, there are still opportunities, and that feels like a super saturated space. And they are now saying the podcasting space is saturated and it's not even close to the amount of blogs. So definitely with the company pages, that's even earlier. I think the opportunity there, you've converted me, Michelle. The opportunity there is way bigger. But Michelle, we've talked about how to not become a dinosaur on LinkedIn, how to make sure you're making the most out of your company page, engagement, exciting opportunities. And I'm curious, when people ask you, what do you do? What is your typical answer?
I help B2B marketers and business owners sell more on LinkedIn as the modern buyer wants to buy. So, no spamming. So, don't come to me if you want to automate processes or talk about lead gen, but I will teach you how to sell more on LinkedIn without spamming. I have to say that again because there's so many bad selling practices out on LinkedIn that I almost have to distance myself because people are like, no, don't go and bombard them. So, yeah, but I love working with marketing teams to teach them what I've learned as a social seller over the last 8 years. I love to teach them how they can do that within their businesses too.
And I know you do it across the globe because we were talking about it before we press record. And is there anyone, because we talked about different size companies, is there anyone that's a sweet spot, like anyone that is your ideal client because of where they are and how they can make the most out of what you teach them to do?
Yeah, sometimes it's a business owner that's responsible for the marketing activities or, LinkedIn activities that has, wearing all of those hats all at once. And so it can be that size. But I also find it's a bit bigger, probably on the medium side of businesses, so 50 to 100 employees. And the reason that that can be, or even maybe 20 to 100 employees, the reason that that can be is that they've normally got a strategy in place. And so here's the conversation that happens. Michelle, I know I should be on LinkedIn, but I know our company should be on LinkedIn, but, and they don't know how to execute it. So my job is to say, look, you've got a good strategy and strong brand. Here's how you can put that out on LinkedIn in the best possible way that uses the least amount of resources, because businesses should be focused on what they do best. And LinkedIn should add to that, not take away resources. And so it's really tricky to navigate. That's why I work one-on-one with businesses. I don't do group training with lots of different companies because I just love that they're all so different. And I'm fascinated by founders' stories, which I'm sure you are too, when you get to know founders, why they set up the business, what makes them different. And being able to get that out is just a privilege that I get to do every day.
Absolutely. And I feel like we could talk for hours. That's a whole different conversation. I feel like when a when a story is well executed, that's a huge asset. And I particularly love the way you did it, that you have I'm actually gonna steal, I'm gonna get inspired by the way you do it. Let's call it that, because
Steal away.
you have your about page, and then you have a link to your founder story, which I think it's great because in the about page you cover the typical business stuff that people are expecting on an about page. But then when you share the founder story in a different page, you're kind of like inviting them and asking them first if they want to go deeper. Because if the answer is yes, then you can share more. In it's kind of like asking for their permission, like, hey, instead of my about page, here's my whole life and business story, you're asking for permission. And then when you see the engagement, which one is doing better. So I love it. I'm gonna definitely implement that. Like I said, I feel we can talk for hours, but I want to be mindful of your time, Michelle. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before we close?
Look, what I want to share is be open minded. Look at LinkedIn company pages. If you haven't gone and tried them in the last 2 years, I want you to take a fresh look at them because you'll be surprised at how many new features are there. And I can tell you that there's so many new features also coming. So for me, those that look at it with a fresh set of eyes, that look at it and say, how can I use this tool to get more out of LinkedIn, to help support my personal brand, to grow my business? Then that's what I want you to do, because those people that do that, all of a sudden have all the tools of LinkedIn, not just one section. And so use it to amplify your personal brand. This isn't a conversation where I've said, ignore your personal brand and only focus over here. No, not at all. I'm saying, go and have a look over here and see how you can use the two together. So, and if you want to find out how to do that, then follow along with my content. I talk about it all the time. But yeah, have the best of both worlds. Eat your cake and eat it, as they say.
I think that's a great closing message. Take a fresh look at your LinkedIn page because it's an asset that can create a lot of value for you. Well, Michelle, this has been an amazing conversation. I have no doubt that the conversation is going to continue asynchronously on LinkedIn as we keep seeing what you're doing, because now you've definitely converted me. We're going to pay a little bit more attention to our company page. But thank you for being here and sharing your insights, and for those out there listening, thank you for being with us, and we'll see you in the next episode.